So hello everybody and welcome to Healthcare Careers in Focus. So we've reached that time of the year where we are starting to think about our future, and those people that are thinking of applying to university really need to start focusing and working on their application forms. But luckily we have help at hand for this. So we have Sally joining us today, who as part of one of the many jobs she did in the past, she was an admissions tutor. So she's going to talk us through some top tips and some advice on how we complete admissions forms. And also she's going to give us a little bit of behind the scenes knowledge about how the process works. So, Sally, thank you very much for joining us today. And I shall let you take it from here.
Thank you very much. So you can see the title of my presentation today is Confessions of an Admission Tutor. So we're going to be looking today at the process of application and some hints and tips about interviews and some things that happen behind the scenes in university land. So my current role is I'm a senior clinical manager and I work within NHS England. So this is my little journey. So I did not come out of the womb wanting to be a nurse. I didn't actually. My mum was a nurse and actively discouraged me. So I did get a place to study physiotherapy, but unfortunately I got a D in A-level biology, so I had to rethink pretty quickly about what I was going to do for my future. So I chose to become an adult nurse instead, although just as a bit of a disclaimer, I think I would have made a pretty awesome learning disability nurse if I'd have known a little bit more about it at the time. So after qualifying, I went straight out into the community into district nursing, which was very unusual at the time. I've also worked in occupational health, in general practice, which is called primary care. I've worked in walk-in centres, and then I moved on to be an assistant professor of nursing and admission tutor extraordinaire, if I do say so myself. This is me at one of the open days, and then currently working for NHS England at the moment. So now we're just going to watch a short little video. It is a widely available video that was produced by the NHS, but because it does depict some scenes around nursing care, some of you may find it a little bit distressing. So, you know, if you do want to look away or pause at this time, please do. But otherwise, we'll hit play. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the
We are the early start. We are the beating heart, born to answer a call. We are healthcare for all. For the people, for the nation, no matter your means, no matter your station. An institution built on a constitution. Our existence, your welfare, respect, humanity, compassion, care. In 72 years, we've come a long way, and there's still much to do, so we're here to stay. We are sons, daughters, husbands, wives, healing, supporting, saving lives. We're someone you wished you'd never met, who becomes your best bet. We're a thank you letter for making a 4-year-old better. We're a reward on every ward, gratitude that tells us we're valued. We're heroes who sometimes feel like zeros. We're literally blood, sweat and tears. That hasn't changed through the years. But we're not angels with wings. We're just ordinary people doing extraordinary things. We are emergency admissions, difficult decisions, clinician, precision, incision. We're podiatrist, therapist, orthotist, prosthetist, pharmacist, oncologist, psychologist, pathologist. We're technological advances for far greater chances. Fascination, exploration, innovation, inspiration, imagination, transformation, and worldwide admiration. We're pioneers. We're over 350 rewarding careers. We're your peers, doing something of significance that makes a real difference, asking you to reach inside the depths of you to find the truth of what you can do. Because we are you at your very best. We are the NHS.
So as you can see, there's quite a few professions listed in that video. So we are nursing, midwifery and allied health professionals and far more. So 350 careers. There is a helpful website, NHS Nursing Careers. There's little quizzes you can do that might help signpost you towards a particular preference. We've obviously got adult nursing, which is the largest clinical workforce in the NHS. We also have what we call 4 fields, so adult being one of them. Then we have children and young people's nursing. We have learning disability nursing, mental health nursing. We also have nursing associates, so these work across all 4 fields of nursing. We have our midwives, we have physios, dietitians, speech and language therapists, paramedics. There are actually 14 AHP professions in total, and we also have healthcare scientists too. So it is really diverse, and we won't go into detail about all of these today. Next slide, please.
You should be able to see the next slide. Can you see the next slide?
I can indeed. Thank you very much.
No worries.
So this is what's happening behind the scenes in terms of a UCAS cycle. So these are the dates for 24 to 25. So aware that some of you listening today might not be at the stage at the moment to be putting in an application. It might be something you're thinking about doing in the next couple of years or so. But generally it follows the same kind of pattern. It's just the dates may change here or there. So UCAS actually opens early. So as early as May. And October is the entry deadline for some universities, so particularly Oxford and Cambridge, and some courses, medicine and veterinary sciences, for example. But from October onwards, basically lots and lots of interviews and offers, reading applications. January is quite an important date. So this is the entry deadline for equal consideration. So if, for example, you want to undertake a course which might be quite competitive, getting your application in before the January deadline really is important, because after this date, we don't have to treat all applicants the same. For some courses that perhaps either have lots of numbers to recruit to, or we often struggle to recruit to, this doesn't always necessarily apply, but it is just something to be aware of. In February, this is when UCAS Extra opens. So if you've put in all your application choices, you get 5 in total. If you haven't had any offers at that point, you get to choose an extra one. Or if you haven't used all your 5 already, then you can just apply for anything within the normal cycle. So yeah, it's basically a little bit of a freebie option for you just to be aware of. The university choice deadline, this is often to be confirmed. It happens generally, I think around March, April, might even be May time. So this is the deadline that you have to confirm your first and insurance university from the offers that have been made to you. If you're still awaiting a decision from a university, which can sometimes happen, particularly if they've got lots of interviews to get through to, they may well put a later deadline on that for you. But basically, behind the scenes, university admission tutors are really pushed leading up to this date to make sure all our offers and our decisions are made, and we might be doing lots of things like last minute interviews. Now, by the time June comes, this is the absolute final date to apply with choices. So after this date, all applications must be made through clearing, and we have a separate session coming up on clearing for those that want to find out more. It is generally quieter. It can be people changing their minds, and often it can be quite mature students, so non-school leavers. And July 4th, the UCAS Extra closes, and then July the 5th, it's clearing. Again, still quite quiet at this time because people haven't got their exam results. But yeah, 14th of August is basically when things start to get a little bit crazy again. Next slide, please, Kate. So what sort of things do you need to write in your personal statement? Admittedly, this is often something that causes some students a little bit of stress. It's something they worry about, and it's just really to give you some kind of reassurance. We're not expecting a referenced essay or anything like that. often it's quite simple, and we just use the personal statement to really draw out why you want to be a nurse, a midwife, or an AHP, what attracted you to the field, why do you want to do it? If what's been your motivation? What's your points of inspiration? Can you show insight into your profession or your chosen field? So it might be aligning it to something really key that's happening in that profession at the time, or a piece of research that you might explore and want to show that you've read. Do you have a realistic view? It's not easy, and actually training to be a nurse, a midwife, or an AHP is actually something that's really challenging. And actually when you qualify as well, being part of that profession isn't for everyone. So they want to see, do you have a realistic insight? And what skills and attributes do you have already that align to a career in healthcare? And again, we'll go into more details on that in a minute. And that's about who your personal values are, who you are as a person. What are you good at? Are you a good communicator? But also if you have had any part-time jobs or experience with transferable skills. So for example, working as a waitress, actually you're engaging with the public, you're communicating, you're using basic maths, things that you won't necessarily think of are actually a lot of transferable skills and experience. And particularly as a young person, it can be quite difficult to get hands-on experience caring for people. So really make sure that shines through in your personal statements. Do you have the right values and insight? Spelling and grammar. It's not the be all and end all, but it can be something that we look at. And just to be concise as well, really make those key points stand out in your personal statement, because often we're reading thousands of these at a time. So to make yourself stand out, be super concise. When it comes to interview, so all healthcare professional courses, nursing, midwives, and AHPs do require you to have undertaken an interview. Now, what this interview looks like can differ depending on the university and the course that you're applying to. Some may have maths and English, and I will go through those in a little bit of detail. It's often not taxing, it's very basic, and we certainly, don't necessarily always use it as a screening process. It's just sometimes you have to have a competent benchmark, particularly in maths, in order to be a healthcare professional at time. They can be a one-to-one interview, or more often actually we interview in groups, because then we can assess your communication skills and how you interact with others a little bit more than we can do in a one-to-one. They can include academics, so people like myself it would have been, admission tutors, also include our practice partners, because you will be spending 50% of your time out in practice as well in training. And really importantly, we also include service users. So for those of lived experiences of our healthcare system, it's really important that actually we take their viewpoint into consideration when we are selecting our future NHS and healthcare professional workforce. It might be online, particularly during the pandemic. This was very common. It could be on the phone, but more often we like to do these in persons too. So we'll be looking at communication skills, again, your insight into your profession and your chosen field. Depending on the course in university, there could be stations to complete, so multiple assessments. There could be situational questions. And again, I don't know why I put maths assessment in twice. It's clearly very important. So I have done. But yes, again, it's about pulling out those values and looking at how they align with something called the Nursing and Midwifery Council and Healthcare Professional Council Code, which I will go into in more detail. So I'm not going to open this out to the group, but you are more than welcome to pop your ideas in the chat. Likewise, if you're watching this back or presenting it in a classroom, this might be a really good time to pause. So just want you to think about some of the values and key attributes required for healthcare professionals. Have you got it in you? It's a very important question to ask. And actually, what type of person does it take to be a nurse, a midwife, or a healthcare professional? And who would you want looking after you or your loved one? So please pop things in the chat if you want to. It's lovely to hear your insights, but if not, I will move on to the next slide. So these are the answers I'm going to give you now, you see. So our values. So we have a duty to understand and unpick the NHS, what we call the NHS Constitution. And within the NHS Constitution, we have NHS constitutional values. So working together for patients, compassion, commitment to quality of care, respect and dignity, improving lives, and everyone counts. In addition to that, we have something called the 6 C's of nursing, which is what a previous Chief Nursing Officer of England produced. So we can see around there. And again, 6 C's are quite a common thing that you will still see in interviews. So courage, commitment, care, compassion, competence, and communication. So there is lots of crossover with these different representations of values. And we also have the NMC code and the HCPC standards of conduct, performance and ethics. So the NMC code is for nursing and midwives, and HCPC is for all those other 14 professions. These are not onerous documents. They're basically like a guide, and there's different standards attached. The NMC one, for example, is spread out into 4 sections: prioritize people, practice efficiently. And so basically just read those ahead of any interview. And because after all, it takes a special person to care for others, and as part of your interview and part of the assessment process, we need to make sure that you're a person appropriate to enter into the profession. So again, feel free to pop some comments in the chat if you wanted to, but otherwise another point to pause and perhaps do this exercise in your own time. So these are an example of what I would call a value-based question. And again, it's also situational. So these are just 3 common questions. So the first one is a little bit more complicated, admittedly. So let's say you're caring for a patient with dementia. This is somebody with memory problems. They're getting quite agitated and they keep asking what time their husband is visiting. However, you know their husband passed away some years ago, but they're just not remembering it. So what would you do in that situation? Now, the challenge with this one is your values would be that actually, oh, I shouldn't lie to anyone. Actually, should I tell them? But then on the flip side, it's, well, if I tell them, I'm going to cause them more distress. So you've got a little bit of an ethical dilemma there. So there's not necessarily always a right and wrong answer to these. A lot of the time it will be based on that very real life situation. But it's just your thought process and how you unpick that and the different points you're considering is actually what they would want to see you demonstrate in an interview. The last one's a little bit more straightforward, hopefully. So let's say someone you've been caring for gives you a card on your birthday and inside you find £20. What do you do? Well, this one's a little bit more straightforward and there is direct reference to this in the NMC code, for example, is we're not allowed to accept any payments of money. We're not allowed to do that. So that is something you would have to sadly decline and possibly report back to the people that you're working with on that day, the manager, for example, just to make them aware that that's happened. We can at times accept smaller gifts, and it's very dependent on your employer and who you're working with, and there is a reporting structure to that as well. So some of the insight questions that you may have are, can you tell me about current issues affecting the profession? Can you tell me about the role? What could a typical day look like in the profession? Something to explore and research. And there's lots of things on videos now on YouTube and lots of websites that can explain that. What are some of the challenges that you expect to come across as a student or a healthcare professional, and how would you overcome these? That's quite a common question. And the big one is actually, why do you want to become a nurse, a midwife, or a healthcare professional, or an AHP? So just be prepared to ask those questions. So that's quite a nice little set there to start researching and preparing for. Definitely be prepared to sell yourself. It's not the time to be shy. As admission tutors, we do expect people to feel a little bit nervous. But yes, share your experiences and your insight whenever possible. Have a few of these pre-prepared answers like some of the ones I've given above that you can practice and you can adapt depending on what questions you might be asked. And this can be verbal or on occasion can be in the form of a written exercise. So that English assessment I mentioned in a previous slide. Now, when it comes to maths, I can hear you all sighing virtually. For NMC registered courses, we need to make sure you are competent in maths. And some universities, what that will mean is they will assess you at interview as well as expect you to have a level 2 qualification. So an example of a level 2 qualification more commonly in school is something called a GCSE. And this is also the same for English. But I just want to put your minds at rest is don't worry. It is very basic maths. We are not going to expect you to work out the area of a triangle, trigonometry, Pythagoras theorem. It's none of that. It will be very everyday maths and it should be aligned to healthcare, the sort of things healthcare professionals deal with on a daily basis. Some universities will be really transparent about what assessments they plan to use, and they will often send out preparations, example questions, so you can prepare for interview. And if it's not clear, I would say ask. I would certainly, as an admission tutor, have welcomed that. So ask ahead of the time so you can prepare, and things like open days, when you start going along to those, it's a great place to ask those questions. So I'm not going to go through all of these now, but this is something perhaps if you wanted to pause it now, have a little go at. So unit conversions are quite common. So here we've got moving from grams to micrograms, litres to mils, milligrams to grams. So just knowing where, in which direction you need to move your decimal place and how many times is basically the revision you need to do in that one. Another one would be very, very basic. Medication and administration. So paracetamol, quite a common medication you have at home, should hopefully be familiar to you. If you have 1 gram of paracetamol 4 times a day, how many tablets would you give at each dose and the total number over a 24-hour period, knowing that paracetamol generally comes in 500 milligram tablets. So each dose, 1 gram, so that would be 2 tablets at each dose to make 1 gram, and the total number over a 24-hour period, if you're taking it 4 to 6 hours, the maximum doses you would give 4 grams a day. 4 grams times 2 is 8. So that is the total number over a 24-hour period. Now, there's some more complicated ones here, but what I want you to do, if you ever see questions like this, is just stick to the key points of the question. Ignore the administration route, ignore the type of medication if you've never heard of it. Don't let it bamboozle you. Just look at the numbers. So I'll let you have a look at this in your own time, and I'm sure Kate will be sharing the slides as well at some point. So yeah, just give them a go and just concentrate on the basic maths would be my advice. Next slide, please. This is also a very common tool for maths assessments at interviews. It is something called a fluid balance chart. Again, if you see it, don't get into a frazzle. It is just addition and subtraction. It's basically quite a common practice is we need to monitor all the fluid that goes into our patients. So that is what they drink, possibly what they eat, particularly if it's something like a soup, and also what we give them too. So they might have a drip up, so some IVs is what we call them, intravenously delivering fluids as well. So over a 24-hour period, we top all of those up and it gives us a total of everything going in. Then on the other hand, we need to calculate everything that comes out, and hopefully you can use your imaginations to understand what that means. So everything, particularly urine, but also things like vomit and any other as well that we specify. And then often what we need to do at the end of the day is monitor, everything that's gone in marry up with everything that's come out. And sometimes if there's quite a large discrepancy, that's often a sign that something's not quite right and would flag us to look at a little bit more. So that's an example of fluid balance charts. So just to reiterate, just concentrate on the basic maths. Don't let names of medications or administration routes confuse you. Practice ahead of time. Even if you aren't given maths questions at interview, you'll be examined on this throughout your course. Trust me, often every year. And by the time you're in third year, particularly for nursing and midwifery, you need to be getting 100% in the maths exams. So converting those units, rounding up to whole number. So for example, you might be asked to give your answer to the nearest number of decimal places or a whole number. Long addition, multiplication, division and subtraction, if they're really mean, and this is my nemesis, having to work out a percentage. But yeah, these are the main things I would ask you to concentrate on. But yeah, addition, multiplication, and particularly those converting units, definitely a must-do practice. So start with the ones you're comfortable with first if you're presented with a maths exam. Double check your calculations afterwards if you have time, and use common sense and estimates to make sure you don't make silly mistakes. So interviews and offers. Again, this is very much what's happening behind the scenes, juggling the numbers. So this is, as an admission tutor, what I would need to do. It's generally dependent on how many places I would have to fill, how popular my course is, and then actually what my placement partners, bearing in mind 50% of your time is out in placement for something like nursing or midwifery, what placement can take as well. So what my practice partners can do capacity wise. We don't necessarily always want to interview everyone who applies, so a good application is key. But generally, there's a need to screen depending on the course. For something like adult nursing, for example, which is absolutely massive intakes, it's usually less competitive. We go right past the January UCAS deadlines in terms of recruitment, multiple intakes, usually in clearing. Generally, it's less competitive to get into, a little bit easier. And although we do a good degree of screening, and particularly in terms of those values and whether or not you're prepared to undertake a university course, generally we're looking to accept more people than we are to reject people in terms of managing our numbers. We also don't offer everyone who interviews a place on the course. Again, for similar reasons with the application, the threshold will depend on the course and how popular it is. So my job is I need to make sure I've offered enough, I've put out enough offers to fill places, but at the same time, I don't want to over offer places that I don't have room for either in the university or my practice partners to be able to teach out in practice. So I've already talked about adult nursing. Midwifery or children's nursing, for example, that tends to be more competitive. You could typically have 700 applications for only 50 places because lots of people want to be midwives or children's nurses. They often have much stricter review of applications and predicted grades. So it's not that you need to be smarter or cleverer to be a midwife or a children's nurse than you do to be an adult nurse. The reason why the entry criteria tend to be lower for nursing, for adult nursing, is we need far more of you, and actually midwives and children use that as a bit of a screening tool in terms of their application so they don't go over numbers. They will cherry pick past that January deadline that I talked about, and they will probably have much stricter interviews and assessments. So this is what an admission team kind of looks like behind the scenes. So we have our very senior team, the people managing the numbers, making sure there's enough income coming in. So chief exec and deans and heads of schools. Then you'll have somebody like me, so a lead admission tutor, but then also lots of other admission tutors because it's a huge, huge amount of work that we do every year. Other academics, practice partners, service users, and we do everything from reviewing UCAS applications, interviews, offers, open days, dealing with queries directly, making decisions, and doing lots of outreach, so school outreach as well, and into our local communities to share the word about careers in healthcare and in the NHS. Then on the other side, you'll have a recruitment team. So these are a team, they're not nurses or academics, a bit like a sales team, I'd say. So they often have first review of the UCAS applications because they'll know generally what we're looking for, what we're not looking for. And often as an admission tutor for adult nursing, I would just be sent the borderline ones that they don't feel confident making a decision on. They will also do a lot of outreach. They deal a lot with international recruitment, so they know lots of information and details about what is equivalent to UK qualifications when they're screening applications. They will also organise interviews and open days, and they love to stalk the admission tutors like we are in terms of numbers and where we are making our decisions and managing applicants. So this is a bit of a juggling act, being admission tutor. If anything goes wrong, the saying was always blame the admission tutor. So it is a precarious position to hold in a university. So one of the things we look for is actually academic performance. You are going to be studying a degree, and therefore there is a minimum threshold that generally your level 3 qualifications, your A levels, your BTECs, communicate to us your ability to study at degree level, because it can be quite a jump. You need to make sure you have your right values, and I've underlined this because this is absolutely the most important thing when it comes to admissions for healthcare courses. Yes, have a degree of experience and insight. We also have a bit of due diligence, so there's some legal stuff involved. We're a bit gatekeepers to the profession, some might call us. We also have to work within what the Nursing Midwifery Council or HCPC want us to do and setting expectations. On the flip side, I would really want you to come to me. So I'm trying my hardest to sell my course, sell my profession, sell the university, sell myself at the same time, because hopefully if you enjoy my company, you might be more persuaded to come to the university. And I need to fill those places, not just so we have a workforce ready to meet the needs of our patients for the future, but also because financially the university will need me to be filling those places too in terms of an income stream. So it's definitely a bit of a juggling act being an admission tutor. Other things that might be in play is something called alternative offer schemes. So ideally, if a university is going to do this, we'd like them to communicate it to applicants at interview. And in any case, I think it's a good, what we call a conversion tactic. So if I say to you, it doesn't matter what grades you get in your A levels or your BTEC, even if it's not enough to get into something like midwifery, actually, if you drop down a little bit, then I can still offer you a place on a healthcare professional course at this university, even if it isn't your first choice, if you put me down as a firm choice in your offer. So if you definitely come into me, you're signing up, I will get you a place on the course come what may, on a course come what may. So alternative offer schemes can be quite interesting in terms of a tactic. I also think it follows a good principle of having a backup plan. So it keeps people on track with that university and to qualify as a healthcare professional for the future. So it's win-win all round. It can happen at any time. So it could happen after reviewing an application. Often that involves a phone call or a conversation with the student. Perhaps you might not be suitable on your application for midwifery, but you might be more suited for adult nursing. That can sometimes happen. It might be after an interview, so you might not have quite met the mark for children's or midwifery, but again, your values wise, we were really impressed with you. Actually, have you considered nursing? That is a conversation. It can happen at cross-selling points, at confirmations. So confirmations when you get your results through. So if you sadly haven't met the mark for midwifery, again, that's another point where they might offer you an alternative. It can happen pre-clearing, in which case it might require an additional personal statement or an interview, or in clearing it might just be automatic that you didn't get into this, but we've offered you this instead. Would you like it? They tend to follow a line of appropriateness and basically a demand. So midwifery, high demand; adult nursing, huge numbers. Less academic requirements to get into, as long as you've got the right values. And then the next one down is nursing associate, which requires you to have very minimal qualifications in terms of level 3, but again, the same values. And the same thing for children, young people's nursing. We might do children, young people's, learning disability nursing, and then nursing associate. So that's just an example of what happens with alternative offer schemes. So some other general hints and tips: explore lots of different types of roles and different universities. Some are easier to get into than others, depending on how popular their courses are and how popular the university itself is, where they sit in things like university table rankings. Always tailor your application to your first choice profession. So even if, I don't know, that your first choice would be a midwife, but actually you wouldn't mind being an adult nurse as well, definitely stick to your first choice in terms of that application. If you're seen to be a bit wishy-washy, a little bit unsettled in your decision, that will be a red flag for some of those high competitive courses, and it might be a point where your application's unsuccessful. So definitely stick to your first choice. Attend lots of different open days. You definitely get a taste for different universities, see the facilities, meet some of your teachers, your academics, and our practice partners. So open days are great. Ask lots of questions. Ask if you can be considered for another course if you haven't been invited to interview or not accepted after an interview. And again, you might be asked to put in another personal statement if you haven't used all your 5 options already or have your heart set on a particular university. It is always wise to have a backup plan. Interestingly, as an admission tutor, changing your mind is okay. It is a massive decision. You're not going to offend anyone if you've changed your mind at the last minute. Just have an open conversation with us. We tend to be always happy to help. And if you want to find out more about clearing in particular, again, just to have that backup plan, what happens if, in fact, some students actually apply through clearing and don't actually go through the UCAS cycle nowadays. If you want to hear more about that, then Kate will be sharing some details of our upcoming event in the future to help prepare you for that. Just going to finish now on one last video. Same things apply. It is obviously a widely available video on YouTube produced by the NHS, but it does depict some scenes of patient care that some people might find distressing. So just a bit of a trigger warning there. Thanks, Kate.
We are here every day and every night of every year. We've seen it all, from newborn to old age. We are experts in the human body and human emotion too. We answer 11 million emergency calls a year, but we never panic. We take a reading, agree a plan, make a cuppa. We don't do it for the thank yous. We do it for Janice, Alfie, for Jack, for all of us. It's not your normal job. We're mending lives, looking for veins, keeping the music playing. We say hello, we wave goodbye. We're always here, we're always there. We are Michelle, James, Carrie, Yvonne, Adam and Frankie. And at 3:49 this morning, we were Maisie too. £7 2 ounces, all doing well. We are the NHS. We are recruiting now. Search nursing careers.
And that's it.
Thank you very much, Sally. So whilst we wait to see if anyone has any questions, if you do have any questions, please just use the chat box and ask anything you might have to query about. I just wanted to ask you about the backup plan. You mentioned it a couple of times. How important is it to look at other careers and find something else that might be of interest and have that as a backup plan?
I think it's just sensible. Like I explained in one of my first slides is I didn't have a backup plan and I got thrown into panic a little bit. And if I'd have had the time beforehand to research and think it out, I might not have necessarily gone down the route of being an adult nurse. I think actually, with hindsight, I'd have made a really awesome learning disability nurse, but I just didn't know anything about it. And clearing, when you've got those results and sadly you haven't got the grade that you wanted and you're opening up that rejection email, it's not necessarily the best time to be making decisions, particularly as a young person. So I think preparation's always key. We don't want to think doom and gloom, but I think we have to be realistic as well. And I personally would find it a comfort to know if the worst things happens on that day, what else do I want to do? And actually, knowing a little bit more about what a physio does now, I would have made an awful physio. It wouldn't have been for me. It just shows that actually, even in the beginning, when I thought I had my first choice, actually I was being swayed quite a lot by family members, by what other people were telling me to do, rather than really researching it and making those decisions myself. So it's not a bad thing. And I often call that D in biology my silver lining, because without that, I would never have had such an amazing and diverse career in nursing and probably wouldn't have liked being a physio very much anyway. So yeah, it's just a sensible thing to have in your back pocket, I think. And plus with those alternative offer schemes, not to be disappointed if you don't get your first choice, that actually they're there as a bit of a safety net, and it might be something that you've just not considered before because you've had your heart set so much on one thing for so long that there's a whole other world out there that you just haven't explored.
Thank you. Right, I don't think we have any questions. So I just want to say a really, really massive thank you, Sally, for imparting your wisdom on us. It's much appreciated. Really do value the fact that you took time out of your day to come and talk to us about this. As you said, we have got a similar session on clearing, but that will be in June when it's a little bit more appropriate to talk about clearing. So if you want to join us then, you're welcome to. But for now, thank you very much for coming and joining us today. As always, if you could fill in the feedback form, we'd really appreciate anything you have to say about the session because it helps us plan for any future sessions. So again, thank you very much for joining us and we look forward to seeing you again. Bye.